Welcome back. With just 8 days remaining until Namibians head to the polls, the nation is filled with anticipation for a potentially transformative election. Since gaining independence in 1990, Namibia has been governed by Swapo, but the election could mark a turning point. One of the key contenders for the presidency is Dr. Panduleni Itula, president from the Independent Patriots for Change, and he joins us now in studio to discuss his vision for Namibia and what is at stake in these crucial elections that will be taking place next week. Dr. Itula, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you very much.
How are you feeling?
Absolutely delighted, absolutely upbeat and full of energy, ready to get going.
Ready to get going.
Yes.
And the reason that I ask you that also is considering what happened in 2019.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't expect that. 2019, if you go back to 2014, President Geingob secured 87% of the vote. And then in 2019, 56% of the vote, and you were quite instrumental in pushing down that majority to 56 with the 29 or 30% that you were able to secure. When you reflect back on what happened during 2019, why do you think that there was this particular shift that started?
I think since independence, we achieved what we intended to achieve since we went to fight for the independence of Namibia through the 60s and 70s and 80s. And that what we achieved was absolutely tremendous. A lot of people sacrificed. A lot of our citizens supported the liberation struggle with the intention of knowing that once independence comes, Namibia will be a different country completely. But at 2014, Namibia started really dropping down. The first 15, 20 years was good. The international community was there to support us and to get this new baby grow and be strong. But however, corruption and lack of efficient governance started sort of increasing, getting into the system itself, to the extent that the public now started realizing this is not the Namibia that we envisage. This is not the independence we envisage. We achieved independence from colonial South Africa, but we did not start getting economic independence. Our people were starting to become jobless, lack of houses, and above all, corruption was increasing. And I think that contributed. It was at the break of the terrible stain that Namibia has actually achieved from the fish rot as well. That contributed to a certain degree. But here was somebody energetic and able to march the streets of Namibia and to amass the youth to follow him and to understand that it was time for change. And the people believed in that time for change. After that time now, 30 years of independence, many of what was promised over and over again hasn't been achieved. And that would have been contributing very well indeed.
And during that period that you speak about when the corruption started creeping in, you were still a member of Swapo at the time. But what's your understanding of what was happening inside the party that allowed that to fester?
I think people have got it wrong. There is Swapo of Namibia that actually fought for the independence, which I was a member and was a functionary in the 70s and throughout the 80s as well, both inside Namibia and outside the country when I went for studies after having been a political prisoner there. And then after independence, there is Swapo Party, which is the registered political party. These two entities are different legally. And as a consequence is this, that I've never been a functionary in the government of the Republic of Namibia after independence.
What do you mean by that? Weren't you expelled?
Well,
weren't you expelled from Swapo?
This is actually what is very confusing.
Okay.
I have a membership card of Swapo of Namibia, not of Swapo Party. Notwithstanding the fact that they assumed that I would actually contest being expelled from an organization I did not actually belong. I could have gone to court to challenge them, and the court would have asked me, Dr. Itula, where's your membership card of Swapo Party? I wouldn't have been able to raise it because I don't have that one. I've got Swapo of Namibia, which is the flame.
So you were expelled from a party that you
didn't belong to?
Exactly.
Because Swapo of Namibia, there is no transitional clause in the Swapo Party constitution to say that members of the Swapo of Namibia automatically becomes members of Swapo Party. So technically, I would have been taking an entity to court of which I was not a member, as I could not show the court membership card. But again, and this is the whole sort of dilemma. People seek to expect me to have been part of the administration. I've never worked in a Swapo government led by the Swapo Party inside Namibia after independence. Neither was I a functionary in the structures of the Swapo Party after independence. So I'm not part of the looting clique, as it were.
Yeah.
I was part of the revolutionaries that really had a lot of camaraderie and that
All
had
right.
Namibia at heart as well.
Then let's speak about this, because I still want to get to the point around what happened to allow for the corruption to actually fester. So you would have had some of your comrades still being part of the Swapo or that was governing in Namibia. From the intelligence that you may have gathered, what was happening in the party that has allowed for this corruption to fester?
Since I was not part of the part of the party, I haven't had any communication. I was still in the United Kingdom after independence until 2013, when I returned to Namibia to come to a new country, to come to a new administration, and not even knowing the people that there. Yes, we knew each other's comrades. Some of them were in prison with me, but these people have basically changed. So I wasn't having any direct interaction with them, so I wouldn't know what was the mechanisms that resulted in that. But what is also interesting is this, that there were people that has been employed by the government who didn't have the merits to be able to do those jobs. And also, after independence, people were not concentrating about our people are suffering, let's help our people. They were interested in looking after their colleagues, after their comrades, their bellies, their families. And the country at large suffered as a consequence of that. There were no jobs actually meritocratically for people that actually had the qualifications. We had people that were employed that didn't know what to do. And there was very little governance that is controlling what was taking place in the government.
How will the fight against corruption look like under the presidency of Dr. Itula?
What is very important is this, that we need to have a much more effective anti-corruption commission to be able to deal with corrupt systems in Namibia itself. And we also need to have something that is policing the anti-corruption commission to make sure that they are doing their job as well. And also the appointment of the head of the anti-corruption commission must be done in such a manner that the accountability goes to parliament rather than accountability to the appointing authority. In Namibia at the moment, the Anti-Corruption Commission is nominated by the president and appointed by parliament in terms of our constitution. But that makes it impossible for someone to meritocratically appoint somebody. What we will be doing is to look for people that we can present to the parliament for them to choose at least amongst one of them. And
so a change in legislation?
Well, changing the methodology of actually appointing and not so much amending the constitution, because the constitution says nominate, appoint. Now, when it says that, that's rule of law. So what you could do is nominate more than that, because there's no restriction of who you can nominate. But at the same time as well, we need to go into the ministries to make sure that there's punitive measures that will be applied, to make sure we can actually monitor the performance of the people. We also need to remove some of the powers inherent in a minister, for example, in the marine and fisheries resources, where a minister had absolute power to allocate fish quotas to anyone that they thought. And that is giving the resources of the country in one person's hands. And as a consequence of that, when the law was passed, which went through the Cabinet Committee on Legislation, headed by the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, it went through Cabinet and went to Parliament. And because ministers that are Cabinet ministers who are members of Parliament also participate in the decision-making in Parliament, there was a conflict of interest. So he was able to tell his colleagues that, support this bill. And the colleagues did it because there's something else to be given at the end of it.
Then another pressing one is the economy, which also speaks to the question around unemployment. Around 50% of Namibians are between the ages of 18 and 34. How are you going to make sure that those people actually do find the type of work that is required? We know there's talk about some of the exploration and the gas and oil that has been found. But it will take, I think, years before you can actually benefit from that and extract from that.
Absolutely.
But how does a presidency of Dr. Itula ensures that Namibia creates the jobs that are required?
Absolutely sad to see young people going to universities with the hope that this education is actually going to open the doors for them to economic prosperity. And then they come out of that university with really good qualifications and they can't get jobs. We've got a high unemployment rate in Namibia. At the moment, there's no statistical evidence to suggest how many people are actually out of jobs. In 2018, there were 33.4% of the population out of jobs. The population has grown since then. But what we need to also think about is, why don't we have jobs? is because we don't have businesses that are actually to employ people. And then the reason why we don't have the businesses is because our tax regime is very high. The first thing that we need to do is to create an environment in which businesses can come to Namibia in order for them to work, and also businesses can expand. And that's why we are proposing to reduce the tax regime from 32 to 22. And that
is this for income tax, or is it for
corporate tax?
Corporate tax,
yes.
okay.
And that means that once we reduce the corporate tax, then companies will be, if you make 100 million, for example, at the moment you take away 68 and the government takes the 32. But you will be taking away home 78, and we will be taking 22 as a government into our revenue coffers. Now, if you were to spend that 78 inside and invest it in your company, again, we will do nothing to it at all. Because we know you are expanding, you'll be able to employ more people. But if you were to share it amongst your shareholders, then we apply a dividend tax of 10%. And that means you are taking away 70.2. Still a little bit more, but it's a carrot and stick situation. We want to encourage you to invest in the economy, to employ more people, then we can collect more of the personal taxes.
Dr. Itula, just a quick one. SADC is meeting. There's this extraordinary summit that is going to be taking place. Mozambique will be on the agenda. SADC will also be sending its delegation to observe the elections in Namibia. Considering what happened during the last elections in 2019, with that Section 97 being in dispute, and what the court ruled eventually, what's your expectation of election observers, including SADC?
Which court? Namibian court?
This is now the Namibian court, yes.
Well, when we get rid of the EVMs.
Yes. The electronic voting mechanism without the paper trail.
We need to understand that what we actually took to court is not the outcome of the elections, but the methodology used without paper trail. The law in terms of Section 97 of the Electoral Act allows for the use of electronic voting machines, and that electronic voting machines must be concurrent with a paper trail. And where there are disputes about the electronic outcome, the count of the paper trail will be the results of any polling station. And that is what the court actually said, that there was a lack of separation of powers, in that the parliament has given the act, but the minister implemented the act in one section and not the other section. There were no paper trails. So on the other hand, again, even if the SADC observers comes to Namibia, they really have got no influence into how the government is running the elections. The people that controls how the outcome will be is mostly the stakeholders. We need to make sure that we've got our eyes and ears on the ground. And that's why IPC has managed to get 10,000 of our observers, our agents, to be deployed in all the 4,741 polling stations in the country. And that way, we can guard the democracy of our people.
Dr. Itula, unfortunately, we've run out of time. All the best in the elections.